Welcome. This is Bill Beck. You've seen my face enough on the invitations as the chair of the governing members. Um, we appreciate your attending today. I think you'll be very pleased with the discussion today and the interview. Um, to remind you, our goal not only ambassadors, but we want to increase the engagement of you with the orchestra. So if you've been following Coffee and Conversations, we had one event where we had the double reeds section talk, but then we've had Dr. Whitmore from Cal State Fullerton, Carl St. Clair, music director. The last time was the operations group from the staff, tell you about how they set up for an orchestra. And today we have the new assistant conductor. So listen in. We encourage you to ask questions. He's prepared, Jacob's prepared to answer any questions you have. I'll turn it over to Ashlyn.
Yep. Thank you so much again for being here. And we're so excited to have Jacob here and just to get to know him, since especially we were unable to see him on stage this past season. But we're so thankful that we have this opportunity. And so please feel free to ask questions. Just unmute yourself and just go for it and ask him, or if you'd like, you can also type your question in the chat box below, and I will read it out for Jacob to answer. So Jacob, well, thank you so much for being here, and let's start with just a brief introduction on just a little bit of your background.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, and everybody on the conversation today. It's so great to see you all. I really appreciate your time and, of course, everything you do to support the symphony. Without you, I can't imagine where we would be. So thank you. And thank you, Ashlyn and Paul, for this opportunity. Bill, for this opportunity to chat with everybody this morning. I'm really excited. And to introduce myself to those who don't know me. So my name is Jacob Sustaita, but I also go by Jake. One parent calls me Jacob and the other one calls me Jake. So I do respond equally to both. And my brother actually refers to me simply as my first initial. So I'm used to being called a lot of things, even hey you, but please feel free, whatever you're more comfortable with. So I was born and raised in San Antonio, Texas. And that's actually where I met Carl St. Clair for the first time. When I was in high school, he came to conduct the Texas All-State Orchestra. And that was the first time I played in the All-State Orchestra. It happened to be under him doing Tchaikovsky's Symphony No. 6. And of course I was, fell in love with this amazing orchestra created by students from all over the state of Texas. But most of all, I remember being captivated by this incredible conductor who was so intense and so full of energy and so demanding and so amazing. Well, fast forward quite a few years, and now this brings me to the position of assistant conductor with the Pacific Symphony, and of course working alongside Maestro Carl St. Clair. So a real full circle has happened for me coming here. I have known Carl throughout the years as I've been a viola student in Houston, where I studied at the University of Houston, and then also at Rice, where I was a viola fellow and a conducting student. And then I went on to Penn State to study conducting, opera conducting, and orchestral conducting before returning to Houston, where just a few years ago I completed my doctorate degree in opera conducting. And throughout that time, I've had the fortune of playing under Carl quite a few times as a viola player, and then also assisting him at various festivals and events throughout the summers. So when this opportunity presented itself, I really knew immediately that my life was going to change forever in the most amazing way. And it has, even inside of this odd time that we're living right now. But now I'm in California, so this is my new apartment, and I was telling them earlier that everything you see in the box looks pretty tolerable and decent, but if only you could see the rest of the room. I basically shoved everything over to the side so as to not disrupt the picture, but I'm really loving living in Anaheim, getting to know the place, getting to know the city. Of course, I go down to the hall and have lunch with some staff members out in the park from time to time. And it's just been incredible being in California and working with the symphony. We've done a number of projects with Strings for Generations. Of course, the youth orchestra has had a number of events going on. And in fact, this Sunday, I'll be curating a session for all members of all the ensembles of the youth ensembles to work on their interview skills and how to present yourself as an artist and as a musician with your words, being able to speak about what you're doing, who you are, and possibly why a scholarship committee might want to support you or why a college might want to accept you into their program. So I'm really looking forward to it. Greg Whitmore, presented a college prep session not too long ago, and this kind of takes one aspect of that and continues to build on it. So I'm hoping the students get a lot out of it. I'm really excited about it because I think it's a real important factor of being an artist, particularly being a musician, is being able to let people know what you're up to and in an eloquent way. So I'm also really excited about that. And Sean, I know we've got some really exciting things going on with the rest of the youth ensembles. So thank you as well. It's great to see you on the call. And Ashlyn, is that the Reader's Digest version?
Yes, that's wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And it's really wonderful to hear how just Pacific Symphony kind of just circled around back to you during this time, and the amazing opportunities you are offering to the PSYE or the youth orchestra. So
yeah, well, it is kind of a funny cycle. You know, it is a small world, no matter what area you are in, what your profession is. But Roger and I, my predecessor, the former assistant conductor, we did overlap, I think, very briefly at the University of Houston. So I've also known Roger for many, many years before he even came to California. We studied with one teacher in common. You know, it's pretty common for conductors to have overlapped a teacher here and there. But yeah, it's really nice to come fill his shoes in a way, because I do know him a bit. We have a little bit of background. Of course, I know Carl. So it feels really natural to be here, you know, in a different state and with a completely new employee and staff relationship to get going. But I feel like I've kind of been here for many years already.
Good.
oh, what a small world.
Yeah.
So during this time, we are going to open it up for questions from our governing members. So let's see, is there anyone who would like to ask a question first?
Yeah, I'll start off. I see Rosalind is kind of leaning towards the camera, so she may ask the question. No, okay, Rosalind. Although you haven't had a chance to take your position and be able to conduct and do your job, what is the biggest aspect do you think that you'll provide as the assistant conductor?
For me, no matter where I would be and what the caliber of the ensemble is, whether it's a youth orchestra, a community orchestra, a college orchestra, or in fact, the Pacific Symphony, my duty, at least in my perspective, in my view, is always to be right there for the music director in any and every capacity. And as we all know, there are so many facets to being a music director. Of course, it's knowing your music and what you do on the podium, but there's also so much more. You are a face of the organization. You are a spokesperson at all times for what the orchestra brings to the community. You're an ambassador always for music and for the ensemble. And so as Carl's, you know, in my view, right-hand man, I will be there for anything and everything that he needs, including being prepared to step in if he ever needs me to conduct so that he can go listen or watch or just do something else. So it's exciting, but it's also a little daunting, I guess, how big of perspective you take as an assistant conductor. For me, my view is I should be prepared to do anything Carl needs me to do, to be anywhere Carl needs me to be. And that's that could be a lot of things. And so far, even though we're inside of this unique season, this redesign season, it's been fantastic because I've been able to work with different parts of the orchestra that I might normally not have been able to, like working with Strings for Generations, which is an amazing project that culminates next week, at least for this semester. And of course, you know, the youth ensembles have really come together as a very strong team of great minds, thinking about what are ways we can still present opportunities for the students of the youth ensembles to continue making music, to continue growing and developing as musicians, and to let them know that we're still here, we never have gone anywhere, and we're ready to go the moment we can get going. So I just love what we've been up to in curating these sessions and bringing in colleges and doing mock master classes. So for me, it's hard to say there's one or two or even five things an assistant conductor does. It's being ready to be at any place or to do anything that anybody needs, because you are one of the main people, at least in the view of music, for the ensemble. So that's my kind of abstract view. But of course, I think Eileen Jeanette could probably give you many, many bullet points on the specifics of what I do. But I'm looking forward to when our seasons return to a more normal look. That, of course, I'm really excited about. But I've been preparing Nutcracker scores and scores for the next few months in the hopes that we will get back to performing very soon, or at least recording with the orchestra members. So very excited to get going even further than we are now, but really, really enjoying everything I've been up to so far in my time with the orchestra.
Thank you. Thanks.
I do have a question, actually.
I thought so.
Well, to direct him to answer a question that people might have who go to rehearsals, because I know the answer to this, but I think it would be interesting if he could explain when he's sitting in that empty hall during a rehearsal, what exactly are you doing, and what is your role in that capacity?
Good question.
I think that question is fantastic. In fact, I would ask that question if I was a professor again to aspiring graduate conductors. So tell me what you would do sitting there, because it really helps you get into the mind of this individual conductor. So there's a few things I think in general that anybody who's an assistant conductor would be doing. Of course, you're listening for balance, so that if the music director needs to turn around or just wants to check in, can you hear this? Can you hear that? Is this overdone? Because you are ears in the hall, and there's always a different sort of blend of sound in different places of a hall, of course, than on stage as well. So you're always listening for things like that. But what I'm also doing is studying the music director. Part of being an assistant conductor, it's not that you're necessarily a student, although my view is, aren't we all always a student? We're always learning, or at least we should be aspiring to continue ourselves in some way. Yeah. So I would be watching the music director, of course, not only to see how they approach music making, but as a high-level musician, conductor, listening and following a score, I'm also thinking, okay, I heard that. Does the music director react? How does the music director interact with the players? So if you're sitting there and using your time wisely, every moment, every millisecond, you're getting something in the form of how the music director communicates, the choices they make or not make, and why. Of course, you can speculate. And just pacing. How does a music director pace a single rehearsal? How do they pace the rehearsal cycle? What is the energy of the musicians on stage? What are they reacting to? And of course, digging into the score further and further, because as we all know, music continues to unfold for a person, for an individual. You'll always hear something a little deeper or different. And as a music director, I think that's one of your biggest responsibilities. We'll play Beethoven Symphony No. 5 many, many times as a musician, and you'll conduct it many times as a conductor. Every time, I think it's the conductor's duty to bring something to it that's different, a fresh breath, a fresh light, just something to always keep energized, this thing called making music for people, which, of course, for me is always energizing. But when you're also dealing with a group of individuals, you're doing so much more than just leading the music. You're also inspiring them to be their very best musician at all times, and then to come together. So who you are is really reflected in what they bring also to the stage and to the music making. So Rosalind, that's kind of my long-winded view of what I would be doing sitting there. watching and absorbing as much as I can in every capacity that I can imagine.
Good question. We used to watch, I used to go to the dress rehearsals and listen to, watch Roger. And yeah, he was looking at the balance, and he says, oh, looking at the balance, things that he hears out there that maybe Carl doesn't pick up on. And then also he was making a lot of copious notes on the score. So there must be some other things that were involved with that. So it's got to be more than just listening to the orchestra. It's making notes for Carl for later on. Thanks for the answer.
Absolutely. Yes.
Is there another question out there that someone would like to ask?
Jim's
Jim,
got one, he raised his hand.
Oh, yeah.
Unmute yourself there.
Hello, my name is Jim Self. I didn't know that I was going to be on this with the donors to the symphony, but I'm the principal tuba player in the orchestra, and I have been for almost 35 years now. And I welcome you to our orchestra and to this unusual year. But I just wanted to make an introduction. I want you to know a couple things. I hope you like brass players. Viola players are my favorite people, and when I see you privately, I'll tell you why. And I also wanted to say that a few years ago, I wrote a piece for the youth orchestra. Maybe you will consider digging it out and playing it again. It's about 4 or 5 minutes long. It's called El Guapo. It's in your library. El Guapo, if any of you remember, it means the handsome man in Spanish. And it's, I got it from the movie The Three Amigos. Remember
Oh, yeah.
Yadve guy, El Guapo. So maybe you'll pull that out and play it sometime, and I'll be honored if you would, and Jacob. And again, welcome, and take care.
thank you, Jim. Well, being of a Mexican Spanish background, this piece seems perfect for me. I could always say you wrote it for me, even though we didn't know each other at the time. Thanks for letting me know. I just wrote it down. And Sean, I'll see if maybe I could dig up a recording of when the ensemble did it.
It's a Latin tune, Latin kind of a groove, and it's fun to play. It's not particularly hard. It's written for youth orchestra, so I've written a lot of music in recent years, and even a piece for the Pacific Symphony that was premiered a few years ago. It's called Tour de Force, but it's more of a major orchestra piece. And but this one is written specifically for the youth orchestra. And as I tell people, I've written about 80 pieces now since the last 25 years, and I tell people that my titles are way better than my music. I'll explain that to you later too.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing that. Can't wait to hear it. Are there any other questions that anyone would like to ask right now?
I'd like to ask just
Yeah.
vision kind of question is when your tenure with this youth orchestras finally ends at some point in the future, what would you like to say that I'm glad I could accomplish this?
Wow. So thinking about the completion of my time here, I've actually been doing a little reflecting of that, being that my first year is kind of one of these very odd years. And I can't wait to start going into a more normal season and whatever redesign that looks like for all of us in the world moving forward. And I've kind of been reflecting on, wow, because I was talking to a friend that I hadn't chatted with in a while, and he was asking me, so how is it, being out there, and are you really enjoying it? And I said, yeah, I just can't wait to get on stage with the musicians and start doing that part of it. And he said, of course. And then he said, well, how long will you be out there? And I told him and all the things that I will be doing and am doing. And then I just started thinking, so when I'm done here, what's next? And of course, you never know. There's so many paths for a conductor and so many opportunities continue to present itself. Before coming out here, I was a college professor for 5 years as I was finishing my doctorate degree, and then a few years after that. And I actually never thought that I would be here after the years kept going on of teaching at a university, which I really enjoyed. I actually didn't think that an opportunity like this would present itself again, but it did. And one of the things I told my students as I departed my last semester was never stop dreaming. There was a part of me that thought that this part of my dream of being a musician, a conductor, might not really be coming true at all. And then I got a call from someone named Eileen, right? And my life changed after that. So I said, never stop dreaming, because whatever you want for yourself in your life, it's out there. And don't ever think you're too old or not good enough or anything. If you want something, you keep going for that. So when I'm done here, my hope would be that every interaction I've had or the people that I've met and learned from, that I give them maybe a little bit of that there's whatever you want for yourself in your life is out there, and never stop aiming and striving and shooting for that, because whatever you want, you can have. It may not look exactly like you think it should, but if you really have your eyes set on something and you believe in yourself, the world is your oyster. So I'm not sure what kind of words I would put on that other than maybe inspiration. I would hope to accomplish giving people a new sense of life and love of music and appreciation for music. And just maybe that some of the conversations I've had with people or making music with people has left them a little more touched and moved by this art form called music, and what it is to be a musician and the honor it is to be making music for people. And I know we all can't wait for that to happen more and more, especially in a concert hall. But that would be what I would hope to leave people with. Or if you said, so what do you remember about Jake and his time with the orchestra? I hope they would say something like that.
Thank you for that question, Ron.
Yeah, thank
we
you.
loved hearing that explanation. So, are there any other questions right now as well?
Somebody got one? I'll ask another one.
Okay.
Jacob.
Oh, I see one in the chat room, actually.
Okay.
Let's see. So this one is, so how does your, we know that you explained how, did you say you focus on opera studies, correct? So how does your conducting opera and your preparation differ from just orchestral?
Great. Well, I would say just in general, it's a lot easier to look at an orchestral score, and that's a total generalization, but you're not dealing with a chorus and maybe a company of principal singers. So you're just taking away another element, especially a vocal and a textual element. And one of the things as a professor of conducting when I was at the university, I love, of course, the nerd part of me just loves studying the art and the history of conducting, and how you became a conductor many, many years back when Mahler, Mendelssohn were around and kind of spearheading modern conducting in many ways. And right in the old way of training a conductor, you played piano forever in an opera house in Europe. And if you were lucky, you stepped in and conducted an opera, which was happening very frequently, right? And they were doing that many nights of the week. And then only a couple of times a year would an opera conductor take the opera orchestra and do a purely symphonic concert. That was rare, and that was a gift given to a conductor to do a symphonic concert, actually. in many ways, people thought that that was harder because you've taken away the stage, you've taken away the voice, you've taken away the text. So now you have to like take people on a journey just with music. That seemed a lot harder. And in many ways, I agree, right? If you have if you have someone actually singing, saying what's going on and what they feel, and the music is mimicking that or help supporting that, in many ways, all your job is to keep it from falling apart, which is not easy either, because you've got musicians here and then up top a stage and actions going on, and someone forgot to move the couch to that, and the singers are memorized. So I love opera because you never know what could happen moment by moment, and whatever you think could happen usually does happen. So it really is, for me, one of the best building blocks for a conductor is be comfortable conducting opera, or, you know, with vocal forces and instrumental forces and possibly even forces of the stage. Get comfortable in that atmosphere, and there's nothing you'll be worried about when you conduct a Beethoven symphony. If you understand like the context that there's always something to worry about, right? Because music is music. But by conducting opera, I started to gain confidence in myself as a conductor and as a musician that I can't imagine I would have gotten from any other part of conducting. So, and also my background is as a string player, which is not a common background for an opera conductor. Typically, opera conductors raise through the ranks by being a keyboard player, piano player, accompanist. Now I can play, but I'm not a great keyboard player, great pianist at all. But I have a real affinity for the voice. So that's what took me personally into opera conducting and my love of that. And of course, you know, Maestro Sinclair as well is an incredible opera conductor. I just think it helps broaden the scope of yourself as a musician when you do that. So the preparation is the same for a score. I mean, you just are always studying it and the various aspects of it. But I would say it's actually a lot easier when you have only instrumental forces with you, and you're not having to pair other things like a stage and, of course, the voice. But I love them equally, and I think they're both incredible art forms inside of classical music.
It's not so much, am I on? Yes. It's not so much a question as an observation, because my heart lifted when I heard you say that you worked with opera. Obviously, Carl does. But from the other side of the podium, from every musician I've ever talked to in an orchestra and this orchestra, they all say it's marvelous to be conducted by a conductor who has worked with opera, because you have the breathing of the singers and you learn to get that breath, and that's why accompanists are so good if they go from piano into conducting, because if you've worked with singers, and I was married to a bass, you have to listen and go with the breathing. It's just, and so it's noticeable in conductors, and I was really glad. And I look forward to the children's operas that we do with you very much. That was so fun to do with Roger. And so I'm going to get you in costume too, by the way.
I'm absolutely ready for that, and I love doing things like that.
Great. Look forward to it next year.
Yes, for sure.
All fun. Yeah, I love playing in opera too. For those who don't know, I'm a violinist, and so I just loved being in the pit and listening, and it's something else.
It is.
It is, yeah.
And it's become one of my favorite things to listen to as a musician. You know, growing up as a string player, I grew up playing in orchestras, but I remember my first operas. Of course, I heard them on the radio, and they would broadcast them on PBS from time to time. And I was never that intrigued by it. Orchestral performances, I was very intrigued by. But then as I was in high school and getting to develop myself as a musician, I remember going to see the San Antonio Symphony do semi-staged versions of operas, right? So the singers are in gowns and tuxedos, but acting out a little bit and in front of the orchestra, which, you know, I know we've all probably seen. Yeah. And I still remember details, like specific details that were done with the lighting. My first Madame Butterfly, my first Carmen, all of these were done in this setting, so not a fully staged version. and they're still with me to this day. Like, I feel that first Butterfly, like, I felt my heart just get ripped apart and crushed at the end, which is what Butterfly should do to you. And I've seen many Butterflies since, live and in the cinema and on YouTube and such. And I love the music, because what's not to love, but I often walk away going, yeah, that was good, but I'm not like crushed inside. I don't feel like I've been through the journey. And it was all done, maybe it was because it was my first time to experience these things, but I also think it was just a really powerful production. Or they had to get really creative because they didn't have a set and they didn't really have a lot of action going on. But yeah, something just got me once I found opera. And then from that point on, I was a viola player, always trying to play in the pit at school or at university, because I was one of the few that said, no, I want to play that 3.5-hour show. I love it.
Yeah, exactly the same way. I was like, first one, sign me up.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Well, I've got another one that's Rosalind kind of brought up the opera question, but in your resume, you had a lot of teachers and mentors, all right? Going back in history of famous conductors that you can read about, they're not alive anymore, is there one that kind of strikes as somebody that you would love to have worked with? I'm talking like Bruno Walter and some of those people in those days.
So the one that for me is still to this day, like the one that I love to watch, that I think is a true master and magician in a way, to watch him actually, the moves and the level of musicianship, is Carlos Kleiber, and will always be. I just think he is incredible as a conductor and as a musician, and a real kind of odd person if you know his history. I always made my conducting classes watch one of the movies about him. Traces to Nowhere is one of my favorite, and it has his sister and many artists who are still living who worked with him talk about what it was like to sing for him, to play under him. He was so demanding, and just such a genius, and a kind of an odd person. He was known for just not showing up or leaving during rehearsals at the break and not coming back, period, ever. You would actually have to worry about him, but they still wanted him because of what he brought. So he, for me, is the one that I would want to, assist or just be there live to see, the most incredible conductor. Then going back a little further, of course, I mean, if you could get to Bruno Walter, why not go just one more back and get to the one and watch Mahler conduct and study with him? I mean, wow. I think Mahler would be great to actually know and work with as a conductor, because he still was straddling Wagner's time into the turn of the century, right, and Bruno Walter and going forward. So, Mahler really could bridge the mid to late 1800s into the 1900s for you, and talk about an amazing musician, a conductor and composer. So he could explain Wagner's idea of tempo modification. And of course, the way they presented music was a little bit different. Of course, Mahler, in the scope of his orchestras and the obsessive nature of what he writes in the scores, there's not a measure that goes by that he's not indicating something, because he was a conductor composer. But I think to know him would be amazing, and what the knowledge he could bring as we bridged late Romanticism into the turn of the century and modernism and what that was. And if you listen to Mahler's music, you hear all that. You hear the lush romantic era ending, and you hear this new concept of sound and harmony. And every conductor that worked with him, Bruno Walter included, right, said there was something. We see the cartoons, these outlandish gestures, because he would do anything to get the sound from the players. And I think that is really one of the pinnacles, one of the hallmarks of modern conducting, is you get the best sound from them. Now, hopefully we don't have to do a handstand or do something crazy to get the sound, but I always told my conducting students, if you have to jump leaps and bounds or get on the floor to get the sound out, then you do it. It might be a little distracting for the audience, and we don't want that either. But bottom line, you've got to get the sound out. Now, if you have to do cartwheels, you just have to train them in rehearsal that I can't do cartwheels during the performance, but get that sound out. So those would be my two, Mahler and Carlos Kleiber. Also, his father, Eric Kleiber, would be great to know too, but I'd go right to Carlos.
Thank you.
Yeah. These are great questions, by the way.
Definitely makes you think.
I'll ask another one, actually. Is there an era or a period or I'm never going to say who's your favorite composer because that's a terrible question, but what era do you like classics? Do you like classics? Who do you, I mean, I know who Carl doesn't particularly like conducting. It's my English composers, but
well, so I guess I have a two-part answer to that. I have an answer that really actually comes from how I started as a conductor. So I was a viola student, and I knew I wanted to try to get into this world of conducting. I was taking advanced conducting as an elective in my undergrad, and I actually took it for 5 semesters. I still hold the record at my school for how many, because I just loved it. And it was one of those classes where you could take it over and over. It's like doing C major scales. Musicians do those all the time because there's always another step, another level, another layer you can get to in your technique and in your ability. So I took that class 5 times and I knew, wow, I really love viola for sure, but I also am falling in love with this thing called conducting. So at a music festival that I was a participant at, I asked the administration, pretty please, could I have 4 minutes to record myself conducting this incredible festival orchestra? Because as we all know, for an aspiring conductor, one of the hardest things is to get footage of yourself conducting, because that's what we need to get into a master class or a festival or a school. Well, that's not easy to do. And usually what happens is you round up a couple of your friends and you do some chamber something, and that works just fine. But this was an opportunity for me to conduct a really great, amazing ensemble of collegiate level performers from all over the country that came together for a festival doing really great music. So the administration, which I knew for a few years, said, well, sure, we're okay with it as long as the conductor's okay with it. So then, so I passed the first test. Now I had to approach the music director for that week. It was a new conductor every week because it was a festival. And I told him my idea, said I was an aspiring conductor, and could I please have a few minutes just to record a little bit of myself conducting? So he said yes, which blew my mind, and I was really excited, although I had a feeling he would, because he was one of those conductors like Carl who mentors musicians just naturally and is always like, if I can offer you anything, then let me offer that to you. And he was that kind of man and conductor. So then what's funny though, is I didn't pick just any piece, of course, to conduct. It was the week that the orchestra was doing Ein Heldenleben, one of the largest tone poems of Richard Strauss. And so that piece is broken up into episodes, right, that tells the story of the hero. And the first 4 minutes are the exposition, the hero, which is incredible Strauss music, right? It's all in E flat major, so it's none of the funky, quirky stuff that comes later. It's heroic. It's got the horns just soaring on the main melody of who he is as the hero. So then towards the end of this one rehearsal where we knew I was going to conduct, at the end of it, during the time when the orchestra would be on break, the conductor actually turned to me in the viola section and said, "Are you ready?" And I was, but I actually thought he would wait to the very end of rehearsal. Well, he wanted to go to the hall and hear. So he had me come up. I, of course, explained what was going on to the orchestra, turned my camera on, and did it. And so not only am I this young conductor full of energy, but what I have in front of me is an incredible group of musicians playing this incredible music, a saturated stage, just everybody on there that we can imagine fitting. And it just blew my mind. Of course, I was in heaven, and I probably looked crazy. I still have the video somewhere. And so I did the 4 minutes, and I was like, completely out of breath because I'm a young, energetic conductor doing way too much on the podium. And I turn around to the hall, and he's still out there, and he says, "Do it again." And so I got to do it again. And, the orchestra were my friends, and they were really supportive, and they were smiling too. So my first big conducting opportunity was with a Richard Strauss tone poem. Well, then over the course of becoming a conductor and studying, my first live performance as a conductor was when I was studying as a student, a graduate student, and it was the 3 conductors in the studio doing the concerto competition winners. Well, I was given the vocal winner because I was a string player. So we were paired with things we were not. The woodwind conductor was paired with the string winner. So I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but it was selections from Berlioz and from Richard Strauss, Ariadne auf Naxos. So all throughout my early steps as being a conductor, I had either these monumental pieces or these vocal things, and then sometimes both together. And then I just kept conducting a lot of Richard Strauss. It just so happened to be what I was assigned to a lot. So I was an assistant for also Sprach twice, and actually got to conduct it many times as an assistant. As a young opera conductor, when I was studying in my doctorate degree, I had done some opera up to that point, but not a lot, and mostly Mozart and smaller operas. Well, one of my first assignments as a doctorate student was Der Rosenkavalier, a Richard Strauss opera. So I had to learn that from cover to cover, and I conducted it many times. Vocal rehearsals, orchestra rehearsals, and combined rehearsals. So I've just had a really wonderful experience conducting a lot of Richard Strauss. Now, I'm not saying I could listen to Richard Strauss every day, all day, but I really do appreciate his music. And I love, the density and the textures that he's able to create, typically with these very large orchestras, but not always. And these intimate moments and these singing lines that just really envelop you. I mean, if you like a beautiful melody, Richard Strauss knows how to write a few of those. But because of my love for Richard Strauss, I found Wagner, of course, as an opera conductor, and really love what that provides of Mozart. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but that's kind of my very long answer for what my favorite music is or what I love to conduct. I really like the big forces, of course, things like Mahler. But as I've been a conductor, I really do have a love and respect for music by living composers. And I've made it one of my initiatives with my community orchestras and even with my school orchestra, my university orchestra, to be sure to play music frequently by living composers or by composers from our recent times, because it's important that we are looking at and listening and presenting modern music or music of today for our audiences, just as it is important that we provide Beethoven and Mozart and Richard Strauss. But it's our job as music directors to not necessarily educate our audiences, but we are always educating our audiences by the selection of pieces we choose to present. So Chris Theophanidis is one of my favorite composers and a friend of mine. Michael Torkey, I think he's doing incredible work. Gabriella Lena Frank is an up-and-coming composer that is just out of this world. One of the initiatives I did last season with my community group was it was my first season technically as their music director. I was the associate before then. So we called it a season of firsts. And one of the firsts that we did was we presented a female composer on every concert of the season, including our holiday concert, and just did a little expose on who this composer was. And so we had, Amy Beach, and we had Gabriella Lena Frank, so female composer from the late Romantic period, modern period, and into today's living composer. And that was just really fun. The audience loved it. The orchestra loved it. And so I love doing things like that, not only for myself to learn new music and to learn music from composers that are underrepresented, but also to present it to musicians and to audiences. There is so much great music, and part of the joy of being a conductor is how you put a program together, what your thought about presenting music to an audience is, and how you mix all that together makes it effective or not. And I love that part of my job.
Well, thank
Great.
you so much for sharing that. And we are coming closer to the end of Coffee and Conversations. And so Jacob was so wonderful, and he shared a clip since we were unable to see him perform in person. So he just sent over a clip, so we're able to watch a couple minutes of his conducting live, or conducting clip. And so it's of the Berlioz's Roman Carnival Overture. So I'm just going to do a quick share, so we were able just to watch a little bit of his performing. Let's see. Okay, let's see. I think everyone's seeing this. I'm trying to move this. There we go. Okay. Wonderful. We have so much to look forward to. You know, we can't wait to see you live and in action on the podium. And we just thank you so much, Jacob, for being here. And we want to thank all the governing members as well, just for your amazing support and engagement. And it's just it's our main source of just encouragement and just persisting during this time. So Jacob, do you have any last words as well, and Bill as well?
I want to echo what you said, Ashlyn, and Jake, or Jacob, whatever you want to say. Yeah, excellent. It's very, very informative and very entertaining. I appreciate your time, particularly in this difficult time of the orchestra. Look forward to seeing you on the podium or in the rehearsal hall and getting back to live performances. And I want to thank everybody from the governing members and Jim, the orchestra, the tuba player, for attending. So everybody have a good holiday. We'll resume in January as a group with the Board of Counselors in a combined event with, I think it's okay to say Richard Kaufman is booked for that in January, and we'll combine the governing members with the Board of Counselors. So thank you. Everybody have a nice holiday.
Thank you.
And thank you all, everybody. Great to be here this morning. Thanks so much for having this. Really appreciate the opportunity. I hope everybody has a great holiday. And again, thank you so much for being a part of the orchestra and for being a part of the conversation this morning.